And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode, I can't even remember the count now, 133, 134, something like that. I'm TJ.
And I'm Kent, and it's been 134 of these. We still can't count. It really hurts my brain.
My social media posts, that's what I get for trying to do this while I work at the same time. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest for you tonight, Mr. Ron Flowers of Citizens Defense Training. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here. Appreciate
it. Outstanding. So as is customary, especially for the new person in the hot seat, Ron, why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself and tell everybody out there listening, who the hell are you?
Well, I'm a retired merchant marine, retired police officer. I have two private companies. Citizens Defense Training is one of them for civilians, and the other side of the house is police defensive firearms training, primarily for police and at agencies that allow them on their ranges. And I work for NRA Law Enforcement Division, traveling the country, teaching police to be instructors, firearms instructors. I also work for National Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors Association, short version that is NLEFIA, and I'm a staff instructor for them, which is also a national training organization for law enforcement and security.
Yeah. Well, outstanding, man. So sounds like you've got quite the resume for sure. We're definitely glad to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So should be a really good conversation tonight. Folks, as always, if you have questions, we'll be monitoring the chat. Feel free to post them up. We'll address them to Ron and the rest of the panel as we get through the episode. But in the meantime, just to catch up with the fam, Kent, what's been new with you, buddy?
Man, I'll tell you what. Jiu-jitsu still going well. Still teaching guns. Just got done AI-ing for MSP for 2 days. That was really fun. Ron was actually out at that class. Great group of guys. Big group of guys, but great group of guys. And gal came out for that. Or as I said, dudes and female dudes. I said that a couple times when addressing those. But it was cool to have everybody out. I've got private lessons. I taught a private lesson until 8, drove home, fired up microphones, and then ready to do this. So we're still doing that. And I got a real good friend getting married tomorrow. So I got to get up, put on a suit, and be an adult.
You in a suit? I don't know that I've seen
the haircut and the whole thing. Like I'm almost trying to be an adult.
Your haircut's mine.
Fine. We're the same person. It's fine. What about you? You just did a jiu-jitsu tournament. I saw you on the podium of a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Yeah, you did, actually. I've actually got some really good pictures. One of the young ladies at our gym is an aspiring photographer. She's actually doing very, very good. I'll have to look her up. I want to make sure I get her Instagram handle correctly. Give me a second, folks, while I look this up. So Annabelle Klein Photography. I got it.
Well, you're fast.
Annabelle Klein Photography. She's one of our coaches, aspiring photographer, very, very intelligent and talented young lady. So guys, go out and give her a follow on social media. But I'll be posting some of her pictures that I purchased from her following that event. Yeah, man. So ended up taking second at the Spring Nashville Open. My wife also took silver in no-gi. What was really cool, though, and this is consider this an inspirational moment for people who might be doubting themselves. Never think that your contribution doesn't matter. It was because of my wife's participation and registration for that event at the last moment, where she finally overcame her anxiety, her nervousness, and decided to go compete in. Now, just to be clear, my wife is a blue belt. My wife has been training just a little bit less than I have. So we're both right at about 3 years. But she's only been training no-gi pretty religiously for the last couple of months, probably the last 4 or 5 months. And she was nervous, not sure she was ready, went and competed in no-gi. And it was because of that additional registration and her placement in the event that ultimately put our team over the top. And my gym was able to take home first place overall points for the no-gi tournament for the weekend. So huge accomplishment for my gym. Huge accomplishment for my professors and our team as a whole. So really, really cool, just overall weekend for everybody.
Well, that's good. That's awesome, man. That's very awesome. You must be very proud.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
They're a dangerous house, man. Them kids are training, homegirls training.
Yeah.
I swear to God, that corgi's going to start learning some shit. If you teach the corgi to shoot, I'm done. If it starts being tactical corgi season up in this bitch, I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm just going to strap a gun to his back on a saddle.
There are no laws against dogs carrying concealed.
That's right.
You know, if you want to be technical about it, there's absolutely nothing on the books.
I feel like there's
Ron, we're gonna get along. We're gonna get along great.
Yeah.
I feel it in my bones.
With a dog with a Glock on its side, and it says something to that exact effect. Now I know where the meme came from. We're gonna find out tonight that Ron Flowers wrote all the internet memes. It was him the whole time. He's been hiding. So I love the whole family thing, man. I can't wait till little guy can get out. Our dude's about 5 months away from his bare minimum age limit to be allowed to train. So that'll be pretty cool. I don't want to go to Nogi in the morning because I have to go to a wedding, but I'm going to Nogi in the morning because I don't want to. So that's what we do. We just get up and go do the things we don't want to.
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm actually doing. So I'm going to do open mat tomorrow, but I'm also going to be doing an edged weapons class from noon to 4 tomorrow that my professor's putting on. So fun fact, right? Professor Ray not only runs an amazing gym and an amazing jiu-jitsu program, but also is a combatives instructor. And for some very cool people within the military, a lot of experience, a lot of background. He's not just a jiu-jitsu guy, and really excited for this opportunity. I think this is going to be a cool class. So stay tuned for updates in the next episode when we talk about, because I will absolutely be doing an AAR on that class.
Yeah, the edge weapon got introduced into my old line of work back in the day, and then I got exposed to it with Kyle DeFore and also with Bill Rapier and for the SIOC stuff. So I now I carry a fixed blade religiously, in addition to whatever else I might have on me.
I can dig it.
That whole SIOC crew and Tom Kyer. When Bill exposed me to those dudes, I was really blown away. I haven't had a chance to train under Tom yet, but I look forward to an opportunity to try it.
I hosted Jeff Gonzalez Academy. I used to be the CEO there before I retired.
Yep.
And I met Tom then, and we've stayed friends ever since then. We stay in touch. He's pretty knowledgeable guy.
Yeah, that's the training community is a small place, man. There's a lot of cross-pollination and influence, and it's really cool to see that and how, a guy, to bring up a guy like Bill, Rapier can come out of the SEALs and then outside of the SEAL, community, go pick up something somewhere else and then reintegrate it. It's pretty cool that stuff like that can work out that way. So we're not here to talk about Mr. Rapier, though. We're here to talk Mr. Flowers tonight. So we have to like do the crack knuckle journalism stuff and really get deep with him. What do you guys think? It should be fun.
Sure. I'm ready to answer anything or opinion that you seek.
I guess my question first for everybody I meet in this industry on here usually is some form of how did you end up in it? Like what was your genesis to, hey man, I'm going to be a teacher?
Yeah.
Where did that start for you?
Well, I took my first instructor school back in '93 from the NRA when I was fairly new on the job. And I didn't work as a full-time instructor for the police department, but I would come out and help our recruit classes. And I would come out and help with the in-service guys, the annual in-service training, just to get my feet wet. I continued to take additional training. I took my first tactical shooting instructor class in Quantico from the NRA back in the day. and I continued to help out on the ranges. But in 2000 and what's 2022 minus 15, whatever the heck that was, I went to work for the NRA and I started teaching cops all over the country, teaching them how to be instructors, or train the trainer kind of a thing. I did that for a while, picked up by Leffie in 2019. But in between that, I was when I got back from Afghanistan, which I did a couple of deployments over there as a contractor, a law enforcement professional. When I got back from that, I got into the security industry as a training manager. And after 3 years there, they lost some big contracts, the company I work for. And the job went away. I got laid off. So my wife suggested, hey, you like training people, you like teaching, why don't you start your own company? And that's what I did, the civilian side first. And that's how I kind of got doing it full time. So
go ahead. Prior to your 93 thing, had you taught anything else ever in your life before firearms?
Well, I taught some investigation technique. I taught drug identification. I taught some counterterrorism and terrorist general knowledge kind of a stuff. But other than that, well, that wasn't prior to 93. I apologize. That was prior to teaching firearms full time. Prior to 93, no, I didn't teach anything. I was a Merchant Marines officer, and I was officer on liquid natural gas ships under the American flag, and we used to load in Indonesia and discharge in Japan. And then, of course, even before that, I was a sailor in the Merchant Marine, working on all kinds of ships and traveling all over the world. So I wasn't a teacher per se until I took that first instructor school, and I didn't do it seriously until I started working for the NRA.
So a quick side question / note. TJ and I prepped a little bit for this conversation more than we normally do because I didn't understand your background.
Okay.
So when I'm the civ guy, I'm the normal American life dude. So when somebody says things like contractor, law enforcement capacity overseas, et cetera, I go, hey man, help me make sure I don't ask this guy stupid questions and talk me through what he means by this. Right. Okay. And I've heard you've told me before, and I paid attention. I was like, yeah, I understand what this means, but I'm not entirely sure I do. Something that occurred to me for our audience is that I guarantee you somebody's going to hear this and say, what the hell's a Merchant Marine?
Oh,
right.
Yeah. My short answer is a seagoing truck driver. So if American goods are being shipped overseas or we're importing, the guys that move that stuff around the world's oceans. In addition to that, Merchant Marine also encompasses American civilian mariners on military ships, like some of the military pre-positioning ships. They have in this case Marines and Marine battalion equipment on it, armaments, fuel, the whole 9 yards. But the guys that actually run the ships and get it from A to B are civilian mariners. I also worked as a civilian mariner on a research ship for Columbia University at one point, a long time ago. I also laid telephone cable, in this particular instance from Guam to Taiwan, on a cable ship long lines, which had been part of AT&T and Bell Labs. So we laid deep water undersea telephone cable. And then on the LNG side, liquid natural gas, some people may know that's a cryogenic cargo. It's natural volume 600 times by converting it into a cryogenic liquid. And it's kept at about minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you were to have a spill, any normal steel that it touches immediately becomes brittle and can shatter. And then, of course, it's a potential bomb in that if you had a containment vessel rupture, the gas on the periphery mixes with the oxygen to achieve a ratio where it could burn, which, of course, increases the evaporation rate, which increases the size of the fire. It doesn't blow up like a high explosive, but it's a constant boiling, rolling type of an explosion should should we ever have suffered some sort of a major containment rupture and then ignition of the gas. So it was an interesting career. I enjoyed it, and I walked away from it in the early 90s.
Huh. So I think it's interesting how people make these transitions, like various levels of service. What I'm going to put on this is I'll use a Kentism for a moment. You got about 35 years of dude shit in your background, right? Various levels of dude shit. We did dude shit on the boats, and then we did dude shit on the streets as a cop, and then we did dude shit overseas for a while, and then we taught it, right? It's interesting, the personality type. What I'm driving at is there's a certain kind of guy who does these jobs. You know, people who are willing to be away from family for a long time, people who are willing to be in high stress roles, people who are willing to be a little bit more exposed physically and mentally. Right. Not every person can run a career track like this and, you know, stay in it. There's a certain type of person that it attracts.
Well, the seagoing part of it, I was sucked into it, I should say, because as I mentioned to you guys offline, I'm a reader, and I was a big Joseph Conrad fan. I read all of his novels. He became famous as an author in his third language. He was a Polish sea captain who also spoke French and wrote in English. And he inspired me to go to sea. And that job was, people think of it as romantic, and I guess in some ways it was, but it was also quite lonely. And then there was stress. There was stress. Bad weather in the North Atlantic when one of our booms got loose on a cargo ship, and we had to try and secure it when we were in heavy seas. Rescuing people off a sinking gypsum carrier in the South China Sea. The ship was called the Evpo Agspear, and I got hit in the head with a block, but fortunately I had on a hard hat. I was a small lifeboat in heavy seas trying to go over there and get them offloaded, some of them onto my lifeboat and some of them into their lifeboat, and I towed them over to our ship where they went up onto a gangway, and they were safely re-embarked. But trying to get that lifeboat back on board was... it almost cost the lives of 6 of us, 4 crew members, including me, and then 2 of the guys from the sinking ship that we had on board our lifeboat. Little known fact, lifeboats are made to get off a ship in a hurry. They're not made to come back. You just float around out there until somebody can rescue you, kind of a thing. So that was interesting.
New Fear
we rescued,
Unlocked.
79 boat people from Vietnam in the South China Sea one time. That was an interesting trip. There's a lot of stories like that, but you know, that was prior to law enforcement, and I just got tired of it and wanted to do something different.
TJ, New Fear Unlocked. You don't want to be on a lifeboat waiting for Ron to come get your ass. You need it.
So check this out. So when I was a kid, the U.S. Navy often puts on what they call a family day.
Yep.
Right. So my dad was Navy. But growing up, one of my buddies as a kid, his dad was still active Navy, and he was stationed on the Eisenhower, which is an aircraft carrier. I got to go with them on a family day, and it was 24 hours at sea. You get on the aircraft carrier, they embark, 12 hours out, flip a Huey, 12 hours back. Now during that time, it's a really cool experience. They show you all the weapons, all the different, levels of the aircraft carrier, all the different tools and different implements about the aircraft carrier. They do an air show, which was really, really cool. Experiencing the sonic boom of a fighter jet as it gets launched off of an aircraft carrier is an amazing experience. But one of the things that I realized when I was about 12 years old, getting to go through this day, was as I stood on the flight deck of this aircraft carrier and I looked out in all directions and you see nothing but water, being lost at sea is an absolute fear of mine.
Yeah, I get it. And when I became an officer, one of the things I learned how to do was navigate. This was before the advent of GPS. So we did have some satellite coverage, but it was spotty. So I navigated with a sextant, taking sun lines, moon lines, and shooting planets and stars, and then plotting those lines out on a chart periodically to get a sense of where we were. Latitude is straight up the height of the sun above the horizon in a given area, and that gives you a line of latitude. But longitude is based on time, so you had to make sure you were fine-tuned into Greenwich Mean Time, which is the zero time in Greenwich, England, and all. You had to take your measurements in a rolling ship, and you had to do it when the sky was clear enough to get visual on celestial bodies, so to speak. And then there's some math involved, some spherical trigonometry, which I'm really not smart enough to explain, but I was able to do it. So I was speaking of Navy. That was interesting. My dad was Navy in the 50s, and I was a naval officer, reserve officer, based on the fact that I had a Merchant Marine officer's license. I also got commissioned. Ronnie Reagan signed my commissioning papers, and not personally, it was his robo pen, I'm sure. So I was a lieutenant commander when I walked away from that and resigned my commission to stay in police work. And my son was a submariner in the Navy on fast attack nuclear subs for 2 deployments. When he graduated college, he didn't want to be an officer, so he was a college grad, and he was a sonar supervisor on Los Angeles class fast attack submarines.
Interesting.
So, yeah, leave it to the U.S. government to develop ships that were designed to sink.
Well, I thought the Confederates invented it first. I mean, that was the first submersible, wasn't it? They had the Hunley, and then they had what was it? The Monitor or the Merrimack? I forget which one it was, but
I mean, I would consider both the Monitor and the Merrimack submarines to a degree. They were the bulk of them was submerged and below sea level. But yeah, the Hunley was the first submarine in the United States fleet. I quote unquote United States fleet. It was the Confederacy. Let's be clear about this. But at the same time, though, it was the U.S. Army that designed planes that you weren't intended to be in when they landed.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, the philosophy behind some of that stuff, but. Yeah, so we have a naval background.
All right. So first, I find it interesting that when you refer to the Confederacy, you say they instead of we. Lord knows you were there.
Well,
there we go. There's the first old joke.
You've got me started, because it's a running joke in my family that I refer to as the War of Northern Aggression.
I know. See,
and I've said that to you before, and I also understand the real history behind what motivated the conflict between the states. It was not a single issue. It was a myriad of issues: economics, politics, tariffs, cultural divide, as well as the issue that everybody attributes it to. But yeah, I said we for the longest time, but I've lived up here since 79. I've lived in Pennsylvania since about 79. So slowly but surely, I say they.
You've been assimilated. I get it.
So I gotta hold on. I got to speak to this real quick, because Ron, I know you're relatively local. You're relatively local to Kent. Somewhere on someone's phone, there is a picture of Kent and I standing atop, what was it, Devil's Den?
Devil's Den. Sure.
Yeah, Devil's Den in Gettysburg.
We go there frequently.
You've got a Southerner. Yeah, you've got a Southerner and Kent. Sitting there hashing out the details and the historic importance of the conflict that took place in Gettysburg. And yeah, man, if you haven't gotten a chance to spend time, like just straight up quality time, not just on the range, but as a friend, as a family member with Kent, who's incredibly passionate about, Civil War history, at Gettysburg, I'll tell you what, man, you are missing out, and that's something you should put on your bucket list for sure.
Well, yeah, we've talked about. I was just going to say, Ron and I have kind of gone around about this a little bit.
And I have a great uncle who was a major general for the Confederacy He was wounded several times during the war. He's a West Point grad, and he was wounded on the second day of Gettysburg due to a shell burst, and he was evacuated. And on the retreat to Stanton, Virginia, his tourniquet on his amputated leg let go, and he died at age 29. Major General William Dorsey Pender. You will see his signs along Seminary Ridge, Pender's division. And if you ever go back up there and look for that, I'm somewhat related to him, and on my mother's side. So we're kind of proud of that. There's some books about him. He won the Confederate Medal of Honor posthumously. He was awarded, I should say, posthumously, the Confederate Medal of Honor.
This is certainly a discussion for another episode, but there's something to be said about the fact that you said he was a major general.
Correct.
At 29.
Exactly.
They don't make them like they used to, man. You give a 29-year-old that level of responsibility, to watch him just absolutely evaporate under pressure.
Well, also at the same time, you think about what was going on. Leaders back then led from the front, and they were running back and forth, of course, the front of their lines on their horses and leading from the front. So there was attrition, significant attrition, unlike modern general officers who do everything back from some rear echelon place where it's filtered through several chains of command before something happens. It's different. You're right. They don't make them like they used to.
One of the things that you'll find, you, the listener, will find kind of not unique in the training community, but very unique outside of the training community, is an appreciation for our past and our values and where the history of the country comes from. And to a man and to a woman, every person that I know in this business who is as serious as I know Ron to be and as serious as I know a lot of others to be, they'll have at least a basic functional understanding of these kind of historical terms and these, these types of subject matters. It's a skill set and a trait and a value system that is unfortunately lost in our culture today, where we're doomed to repeat history because nobody knows any fucking thing about it anymore. Kids.
Well,
kids
unfortunately, that's characteristic of mankind. There's been cycles where history has repeated itself because a couple, 3 generations tended to forget it. But you're right. And I have a strong love and appreciation of the people that help create that history, primarily on the military side of the house. Kent, you and I've talked about this. Most of the guys that have influenced me and the way I teach have come from the military. It's only lately I've been dabbling in the space where I'm interacting with people that have a very high level of skill in the competitive industry of sports. Yep. And I don't have any background with that at all. I competed a little bit, but not much. I've never trained with those guys. But the people that mentor me over the years, and I've been training with some of the best for several years now. Some of those people have been mentored by the competitive community. So I think it's time to get involved and learn what they got to teach me as well.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll tell you this, that's my influences come from both places, being non-sworn and non-military, right? My shooting in martial arts and anything I've ever gotten has just been as a guy. Mm-hmm. Just a person who goes out and looks for self-betterment. And I think if you look through the freaking hours and hours and hours and listen through all the stuff we've put on this program here, man, you'll hear that cross influence a ton. That is what my training business and what I teach folks, that's what it is. It's some of this and some of this. I like to think I pull the best, but also it's very much just based on a skill set. It's like, hey, can you do this thing well or not? Right? And I don't care who you are. If you can do the thing well, that checks a box. If you can do the thing well and explain it well, now you're worth learning from. If you can do the thing well, you can explain the thing well, and you're a good American human being who I don't mind spending a couple days with in the company of my family and friends and invite you to my home, whatever, that kind of person, now you're my people, right? So now we're kind of intermixing and intermingling all of that. This might be the nicest thing I'll ever say to you, Ron, but if you're on the show, you're my people, man. Like this is what we do. This is how we try to bridge those gaps and hear from those things. So one of the things I've noticed about you, it's funny you brought it up. I don't have to. Your training resume, not the resume of you as a trainer, we'll get to that, but the resume of folks you have trained with is very service connected heavy.
Yeah.
Very mill, very LE heavy. Of course it would be. That is your background. That is what you see value in. That's what your career has been. Makes a lot of sense. Seeing you come to a class like Jedi's, talking to you about Tim Herron's class, having you attend my own class there's no military involvement at all whatsoever in my damn rifle class. Like, I didn't say wedge formation once. I swear to God I didn't. Seeing that guy dip his toe in the other side, I think is just as transformative in this industry as a guy like myself training with Bill. And Bill's a bad example because Bill's not super military guy when he teaches. He's very much just a normal dude. Going to train with, Cav and Adam at SIG, straight up Ranger guy,
those guys well.
Super, super, super diligent mill cats who, I'm up there as a 28-year-old Vermont hippie, like learning a gun class, and they're looking at me like, what? Who is this guy? So it's cool to see. It's cool to see that influence. So I'm gonna ask you. I'll be us, right? So I'll be the competitive shooter guy.
Mm-hmm.
For between the two of us, I'm that guy. You're the cop soldier guy. What do you think your side of the house? What's the one thing that my side of the house could learn? Like, what do we need to pick up on?
Well, it's ephemeral. There's no hard skill that I would steer the civilian towards other than learn how to shoot fast and accurate. Yes. But it's more of, and I hate to use this word because it's overabused, mindset. I mean, there's a lot of people that shoot, and maybe even they shoot competitively, maybe even they're good, but have they actually faced their fears of physical violence, and have they come to the conclusion they're capable of taking the life of another human being to defend themselves or an innocent person, or themselves, their family, or an innocent person, in that order of priority? And I don't know how many of them have actually done that. I mean, they're competitors and they're good. And I've come to mature and understand I can learn a lot from them about having to shoot fast and accurate. I just don't know how many of them have done that. And I confess I have a prejudice for people in law enforcement and the military because they've written a blank check. And that blank check is for up to and including giving their life for the community or their country. And that, for better or for worse, puts them in a category separate from the average person in my mind. And I can't get past, I'll never get past that. I don't want to get past that. Even the ones that are, and excuse the phrase, even the ones in law enforcement sworn the oath, they at least put on a gun every day. And the potential for them to have to see the elephant, face the elephant, is there every time they go to work. And I think that puts them in another category. Same with the military. You can enlist in peacetime and expect nothing to happen. And then all of a sudden there's a 9/11 and the whole freaking country is spun up. And everybody in the military is on high alert, and everybody's going to be going down range at some point or another. So that kind of, I guess the answer to your question is it's not a real good answer. It's just something, how many of them have actually faced that choice and even in their imagination, and would be willing to do what needed to be done? And if they haven't been tested or imagined being tested, I think they need to be.
That's fair. That's a totally fair assessment. I can tell you, I know a good group of guys that have. I know a lot that. A perfect example is the gentleman we both shared the range with, Jedi. Not a Miller LE dude. That's not his career path. It's not what he does. He's trained martial arts for longer than he's trained guns.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about facing physical fears, getting choked out a lot and feeling that fleeting sense of total lack of control to another man. That's pretty damn close to what you're describing. It's not the same. Nor would any of us.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I should say that I'm not talking about civilians writ large, because I have here. I'm gonna let you know a little secret. I have a private company to pay for my training addiction. I've trained with a lot of people that are really, really good shooters that have never strapped on a gun for anything other than concealed carry, and they are quite willing and able, and they're very good. They're better than a lot of most cops. So I know they're out there. I know they're out there, but I tried to answer a general question, and I should have pointed out that there's an awful lot of people that are, and that's the beauty of being an American. We're a gun culture.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So that in reverse. Go ahead,
real quick though, if I can chime in here, I still think there's some credence to the statement that you made though, Ron, with regard to understanding that if you're willing to strap on a gun, that you need to be prepared and truly have that inner monologue and decision-making process, if you will, to acknowledge, accept, and face the fear of facing the elephant, as you put it. Just recently in Nashville, right here in my state of Tennessee, there was a mass murderer. There was an active shooter situation at a bank, or no, pardon me. There was an active shooter in Nashville, yes, but the one I'm referring to specifically was at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky. A disgruntled employee who found out he was tipped off that he was going to be fired. He brought a rifle to the branch and killed, I think, 8 or 9 people. The law enforcement officer that sustained injuries, and at last I checked, is still in critical condition. Had been out of the academy for 10 days.
Right.
When he took around to their head, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously wish that officer a speedy recovery. Doing God's work, trying to protect defend the defenseless. But at the same time, like, guys, that could have easily been any, responsible self-defender as we champion here on the show, that could have tried to answer that call and try to put an end to that unilaterally without law enforcement support. It could have been them as well. This is no shit a conversation you need to have with yourself. And we've talked about it on the show before, right? But really come to grips with that, guys. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with, pardon the cliche, but the power that comes with donning a firearm to defend yourself and others.
Yeah, there's been a number of cases. Unfortunately, they're not publicized by what passes for our media. But there's been a number of cases of civilians that have saved the lives of law enforcement officers that were in trouble on the side of a road, losing a fight, and these guys saved their lives. And unfortunately, sadly, was it last year? Do you guys remember the incident where a Good Samaritan, got involved and then he was shot by responding officers?
I remember something about it, but the details are escaping me right now.
It's escaping me too. But that was a horrible circumstance, and I don't know anything about it. I'm not second guessing anybody, but that's where it can go sideways. But yeah, this is the beauty of this country. There's still an awful lot of good people, despite what the headlines would try to make you believe. There's a lot of good people out there, courageous people that are quite willing to take care of their families and their communities. And I'm glad to be there.
No doubt there. So now the inverse question, right?
Yeah.
What can the duty folks learn from us, from the regular shoot fast, shoot accurate kind of guy?
I kind of alluded to that earlier. That cops don't make a lot of money usually, but there's a mindset amongst, unfortunately, the bulk of law enforcement that unless the department sends them to training, they're not going to go. And the attitude can be stated this way: well, if they wanted me to have increased me, well, the bad news is for those guys like that is police departments don't have a lot of money, and the money they have, there's a lot of competition for it. So I was one of those weird guys that used my own time, my own money, my own vacation time and comp time. And I sought out and went to training on my own. Now, I took it to an extreme, granted, but I think more and more police officers should be doing that. And there are some, but unfortunately, they get negative reinforcement back on the job from the guys that I don't want to call them jealous, but guys that look at them as though, I guess the guys are feeling guilty that they don't have that kind of commitment. And so they talk smack to those officers. And so they discourage that in that way. But what they can learn from the shoot fast and accurate guys, I'm telling you, the more training, I've been to so much training that was open enrollment, and the best shooters in the class were civilians, and police they were quietly humbled in many cases. And not that came away with a new appreciation of what's out there, their potential allies if they need them, what is actually out there. And I was glad to see it.
Yeah, the shot timer and the target in front of you is a good lie detector, and is a good ego check, and is a real good, it is what it is. We just had Thursday night sites practice, right? We do over here at the local place, we do a free clinic for guys to come out every Thursday night. Anybody, any member, anytime, anywhere can come out. And we had a couple folks from a probation and parole agency come over to shoot IDPA with us. And, thankfully in our culture, because of the people we have in the competitive shooting community at our place, there's none of that like, oh, cops are coming here. And when there is, it gets our culture and our community goes, yo, shut the fuck up. They're here to learn.
Yeah.
Like would you do that to a man and his wife who rolled in here out of uniform? No. Well, then shut the whole fuck up. Because you can't perform the way we're performing anyway. So you're here to learn too. We need everybody to kind of congeal and be cool with each other. Yeah. So Mr. Cop Guy walks in. First thing Hirsch does is extend a hand, introduce, welcome, hello. You are my people. You are here to work. Let me take you aside. Let me tell you some of the particulars and rules. Let me tell you what's expected on the range. Very quickly, you're going to get to shoot an IDPA stage. And there's a young gentleman who is immediately, before he even got to shoot, he watched either me or Josh. I don't remember who he watched shoot a stage. And he just was like you see the eyes, right? He's like, the fuck was that? Like he's got his face off. And then he makes some comment as he's like, by God, did you hit anything? It was me. And I said, yeah, man. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, let's go score targets. And he's walking around looking at the hits going, holy fuck. I'm like, dude, you ain't that far off. I don't care where you're at. You ain't that far off. You'd be all right. Let's get you on there. And after a couple reps, he was, within a few seconds, which, in a match is an eternity, but like,
right.
All of a sudden he's starting to be like, oh man. I'm like, hey man, you've been here for an hour and 40 minutes. Give us an hour and 40 minutes every other week for the next year and see where your shooting's at. Right. Like, and give us every 3 weeks. Give us whatever you can give us, but get out of here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I enjoyed the little bit of competition that I did, then life got in the way. Then I was deployed, so I just haven't gotten back. But there's a lot to learn from it. And I used to not acknowledge that, probably because I didn't understand it. But sure. I can learn how to shoot faster, and I can learn how to shoot more accurate, and not worry so much about whether the guy that's beating me is standing full in the doorway versus using cover. I don't care about that stuff anymore. I know what I would do if it mattered, but I can still learn how to shoot faster and more accurate from that cover. And I'm
absolutely. So it's a matter of, and believe me, Ron, I was the guy, right? Because I was the classically defensive firearms trained person prior to getting into competition myself. So God rest him. I was the guy doing the James Yeager dance behind cover to reload my gun, right? Like we all know what the James Yeager dance looks like. I'm not sure if that has tactical relevance or not, but I know I did it. And why? Well, because this is what I was trained and this is what I was shown. So you see the mimicry, you see you definitely you can get to the bleeding edge of too much focus on raw speed and not enough focus on consequences and accountability if you're not careful, right? I've wrestled with those demons. That's why my capstone drill for my courses is called Consequences. That is the point, right? The whole point is to be willing to take that extra little microsecond and fix your shit before you send around you regret. And you don't do that in a 10-second IDPA stage where you shot 14 targets from 3 positions in 10 seconds. You're not thinking that way. You can tell me you are, but I promise you're not.
Yeah, that got drilled into us on the job. Every bullet has got a lawyer's name on it. So it was a big part of our training, both initially and ongoing. It was a big part of it.
So one form, fashion, or another, you've been doing the gun thing and the instructor thing for the best part of the last 30 years.
Well, even before that, I was a Virginian. I was a Southerner, and so I grew up hunting and fishing. I know there's a lot of hunters and fishermen up in Pennsylvania too, but it's the gun culture in the South is a little more prominent, I should say, than in the North, at least in my lifetime. So that was a big. Daddy taught me how to shoot. My uncles taught me how to shoot. All their buddies at the Isaac Walton League taught me how to shoot. In fact, I still tell this story to this semi-automatic 45, and I held it like this because I was trying to see through the sights. And don't you know, the slide came back and smacked me in the nose. And those guys laughed and laughed and laughed. They thought it was the funniest thing. And a modern child would be traumatized and would never look at a gun again. But I just stopped the bleeding and drove on. But that's the way it was back then.
So, all right. You've been on the gun for the last 50 years. More appropriately.
Yeah, a little bit longer if you count childhood. But yeah, anyway.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, you're anywhere between once you're over 50, you might as well be 450, and 70 is the new 30 anyway. So
exactly. So
what do we know? What I was going to ask you is, what do you think was your? And you might have been 7, or you might have been 47, but at some point there's a moment where you're like, God damn, is this not the coolest thing? Like, I know for me, I'll never forget my brother who is still on the job, but when he was going into the police academy, learning to shoot, his pistol that he had scraped up his money for, that he was going to figure out how to shoot with, because he did the academy thing before he was hired. So he went to an academy, got a degree in criminal justice, and didn't have a job offer until he got out. Mm-hmm. So he had a Kimber or something or other, a 45, and I will never forget the feeling of him teaching me how to press a trigger, and me actually hitting a bullseye from who knows what 13, 14-year-old me would have told you it was 472 yards, and I shot a 1-inch group. All I remember was seeing the little those stick up targets. I remember pressing the trigger and seeing the damn orange thing disappear. Poof.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, the adhesive might have just worn off, and I might have missed that sumbitch by 3 feet low and right. But I know I pressed the trigger and I watched the orange circle disappear, and I was like, "Whoa, that was cool."
Yeah.
Now that
even stickers are scared of 45.
Right. That version of me had already killed a deer by that point, right? Like I had already done some things with rifles and everything, but that moment on a handgun for me was like, "Ooh, hey man." Do you have a standout thing like that? Is there a time or?
Well, the police academy training was powerful and poignant, but I guess the time when it really came home to me and where I thought the training paid off was the first time I had to point a gun at somebody, and I realized what might happen in the next couple of seconds. Now it didn't. That's when I was a part-time police officer in my own neighborhood, by the way. But and I didn't have to drop the hammer on them. But that's when the poignancy of the job came home to me. And then, of course, it was reinforced by the shooting and or homicide victims I dealt with over the years as a patrolman, as an investigator, people on the job getting shot next to me, people that worked for me or under my supervision at the time, all that stuff. Serious about my craft, I guess is the phrase I wanted to use. Being serious about my craft.
Very cool. So let's talk Ron these days, right? So you're an amateur Civil War history buff. You're a political commentator on the personal Facebook. These guys aren't going to get to see that, but those of us who are close enough to you get to check out the personal Facebook commentary. And you're congruently running two different sides of what seems to be basically the same training business, right? Two different names, right. Marketing.
The Citizens Defense Training is the company, and then with the Pennsylvania Department of State, it's DBA, or doing business as, is the police side of the house. And I it's only recently, and I'm sorry to confess this in public, but I started using the word advanced shooting classes on the police side of the house. I don't do it on the civilian side, because there is no advanced shooting. It's basics mastered, but cops will not go because they think they've already got the basics mastered. And what they find out, because I try to stay in my lane, when they find out when they get to my training on the police side of the house is, no, we're deep diving into the fundamentals that you never were properly taught and you never understood and you have not developed an understanding of, and you can't demonstrate on demand. We do a deep dive into that, which is the influence that I've had from the mill side of the house, the Army and the Navy, SMUs, special mission units. That's who's influenced my attitude towards that.
I like that. So a guy with a badge comes to train with Ron, can expect 16 hours of Coach K in basketball drawing up the play over and over again.
Over and over.
Until you get it right? And
yeah.
Or at least until you have some auspice of an idea of how to work on it until you have.
Well, if they can't do it, but they understand what it is that they're not achieving, that's progress.
Absolutely it is.
If you ask them what's wrong on a particular course of fire and they can give you an articulate and reasonable answer about what might have been the issue, that's progress. Sure. You can't give somebody 30 years of experience in 16 hours. So you do the best you can. And I turn them into hopefully more competent, more serious shooters by the time they leave, especially those that come to me that are already instructors. I give them new tools to help teach those that they're responsible for training.
All right, I say we're not in it for the clips, but I'm going to make a clip of you can't give someone 30 years of experience in 16 hours because God, ain't that the truth.
Well, you can't.
You can't. I can't even give them 13 years of experience in 16 hours. So if my experience was double that and getting close to yours, it gets to a point where you're just, and I'm still guilty of this, right? I'm an enthusiastic human. I don't appear to be, but I really am. I'm after it in terms of the successes of my students. I really, really, really am into that. And when I get a hold of somebody, I just want to do that like Vulcan mind melt thing where I just go beep, beep, boop and give it all to them, right? You just, no, that's a bad habit for, you can't try that in a weekend. Somebody would have a stroke, but it certainly is interesting from the perspective of the viewpoint and of the mindset. So if you can't give them, 30 years of experience in 16 hours, well, then what you must do is distill down the stuff that you think is the most important, as though you're only going to get 16 hours with them. Now, the hope is that we do a good job as instructors in retention and comebacks, and people train multiple times. And I know that to be true of you because I've met people who've trained with you way more than once, et cetera, et cetera. But the POI basically is written for like, so-and-so is never going to come back here again. We're going to give them what matters most.
Well, since you said something nice to me, I guess I'm going to say something nice about you, even though it kills me to do so. I don't teach NRA basic, because I find them too basic. And I found what I like about what you offer is you write your own POI, and I haven't been to anything except for the rifle class, but you put into it those things that the people that influence you have led you to believe are important, and you don't stick to this is a muzzle, this is a trigger, this is a hammer. You know, it's beyond that. And I try to do the same thing. I give them safety, I give them the legality, the morality, which to me is more important, because taking a human life is a big deal unless they're a terrorist, in which case they're a cockroach. But yeah, so that's I stay away from being too simplistic. There's plenty of people that can do that. You can throw a rock and hit 10 NRA basic pistol instructors. You throw another rock and you'll hit 15 USCCA instructors. But I don't do that. I write my own. And if people want it, they want it. If they don't, they don't. I'm okay with that. I got 2 pensions. I don't care.
Some of the best in this business teach from the position of, I've got a pension or 2, fuck off. That does lend itself to being able to be exactly who you are. That does help a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got a pension from the Merchant Marine, a pension from the police department, and I could barely scrape by on it if I have to. But yeah. And I do pay for my training addiction with some of my business activities.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Okay, so police DFT, the basics mastered for 2 days. Something you do that I don't do is in the civilian sector, you teach women's classes.
Yeah.
Right? No, I've made a decision that I teach a gun class, and who comes to it shouldn't matter. I could be easily swayed the other way, though, and I've heard very valuable. So that's not where I'm going with this. Where I'm going with this is here in this local market. If you are my listener and you're like my alumni, and your wife is just slamming the table saying, "Honey, I want a women's gun class," well, you best go get that shit from Ron, because I still don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So talk to me a little bit about the genesis of that, why that was an important business choice for you.
Yeah.
What's different about a women's class, all that kind of stuff.
Well, first of all, the genesis of it was my wife's influence. So I give full credit to. She's an amazing woman and an overachiever in every sense of the word. But
real quick, hold up, real quick. I've shared I almost said I've shared the wife with his line. I've shared the line with his wife. Say that correctly. I watched her take a very deep dive carbine course from Bill Rapier.
Yeah.
And perform at a level that was the envy of a bunch of meat eaters.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Flowers can run a rifle.
She can. And she can run a pistol too. Chuck Pressburg, you were in that class. She was only there on day 1.
Yep.
But Chuck told me, he said she was the most accurate shooter female that he's ever had in any class, but she didn't make it to day 2.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
she's an overachiever. She's very accurate.
Just to not that it should be an assumption, but that a female shooter couldn't compete or couldn't push or whatever.
Or some of them can.
But that assumption is often made. And just so we're clear, when he starts talking about his women's classes and his wife's influence, that doesn't mean that she was like doing her nails one day and said, "You know what we should do, honey?" Like that's not the sense I get from this at all. I get the sense of a very squared away lady who can run her tools quite well. So that's just I felt the need to say that. That's all.
What happened with her is I trained her to shoot when we were dating, when we were still trying to impress each other. I don't recommend husbands train wives. There's a communication barrier there when you're trying to teach your wife. And I don't golf, but I've heard this from golfers. If you try to teach your wife how to golf or play baseball or shoot, there's just something that comes up there when it's a husband-wife thing. When we were dating, I taught her to shoot. And if she got to a level of competency, I took her to a Jeff Gonzalez class in Palmyra up by Hershey. And it was a combat pistol 2, which is normally a 3-day. And she did 2 10-hour days in the hot July sun up at Palmyra and just didn't cry, didn't moan, didn't sit anything out. She gutted it out, and she made a lot of improvement. And now she goes, as you indicated, to rapier classes, called the 4 classes. She's not doing it as much since we got the horses because they're a lot of work, but she goes to a lot. She's gone to a lot of training. And to give you an example of how overachieving she is, she's a right-handed shooter, but left eye dominant. We all know what issues that can create, cross dominant. But when you put a left eye dominant person and you put them in progressive lenses, progressive reading glasses, when you turn your head, which is typically what we tell cross-eye dominant shooters to do, just point their chin towards their dominant elbow. That takes the focal point, the best focal point of a progressive lens offline, and she was in two front sights. So she says, well, all right, I'll just train myself how to shoot left-handed. And so that's her new normal. And she's the one who got me teaching women. She suggested it as an idea. And what I've found is women, you're right, I agree with you, it shouldn't matter. But there are women that prefer to learn in all feminine or all women environments. They just do. They can't speak up. They don't feel like they can express their opinions or ask their questions in a co-ed or male-dominated class. And they show up less skilled, less knowledgeable. So they're very intimidated by the whole thing. And so they leave not feeling as though they got as much out of it as they could have or should have. So I offer them women's only classes, and they thrive. The hardest thing to get used to, and I still laugh about it to this day, is they actually nurture and support each other. Whereas, I mean, is there anything more foreign to a male-dominated class? I mean, do we nurture and support each other, TJ? No. We bust chops mercilessly.
Yeah.
And the more we like somebody,
Kent has nightmares about me coaching him with the quintessential "fuck that, go faster."
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you what,
I mean, it's effective, but not necessarily universally applicable to all students.
No, they communicate a whole different level than we do, a whole different space. And I think back to when my kids were all soccer players, and I watched my boys play, and they played, soccer the way boys should play soccer, and men, and 2 of them played at the collegiate level. But my daughter, who was a tomboy, would knock over an opposing player and then stop and help her up. I mean, who does that? Who does it? That was my first exposure
to biology, man.
No, you can't
fight it. It's always going to come back around, right? And honestly, Rod, I'm glad you shared that with us because, I mean, quite frankly, that is probably the most accurate representation of the female to female psyche that I've ever heard. Like, that is probably the best analogous or quintessential, fable that embodies the women's minds, right? They will knock each other right the hell down, probably with a cheap elbow to the lip at the same time, but turn around to help each other up at this after. It's quite amazing to watch.
I mean, when women are in the women's classes, as they go from a crawl, I'm talking primarily in introductory classes, they go from a crawl walk progression in the live fire portion, which is the second half of the day. They're applauding each other's successes, and at the end of that's the fun part about teaching those classes, Kent, to get back to what you were saying earlier, is they graduate and they leave with so much more confidence and enthusiasm. And whether or not they continue to train or they feel more confident they can defend their home if their husband's away, it doesn't matter. The growth that we see in those classes is really gratifying, very gratifying. And my wife, who speaks female, has been a tremendous help in bridging the communication gap that I heretofore had not been able to bridge for years.
Yeah, it's something. So speaking of things the competitive shooting world could teach the defensive shooting world, there's a shitload of female competitors these days.
Yeah.
So you're often squatted with a lot of females. For those that aren't familiar with competitive shooting, let's say 200 folks are going to shoot a match. You don't shoot with all 200 of them. You shoot with 10 a copy, right? And they'll run 20 squads, and there's 10 each of you. It's not uncommon for there to be, half, a lot of male and female, a lot of couples. My wife and I will go to a match, and she'll shoot it with me, right? Or she'll come to a practice and she'll shoot on my squad, kind of thing. So it's not uncommon to see that. It's funny to see. It's funny to see the way one of my things I do a ton of is I teach private lessons. I teach an absolute ton of private lessons, and when I teach a private lesson, I find myself communicating equally effectively among the sexes, as long as I'm willing to acknowledge the fact that there is a difference in the way you have to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of the typical, if your wife comes to me and I've never met her before, my typical level of gregariousness and vulgarity and silly guy shit is toned down, from the level it would be at normally to as near zero as I can possibly make it.
Mm-hmm.
While at the same time resisting the urge to just do the whole, well, since you're a woman, it's just good you're here. Because that's also patronizing, disrespectful, and unhelpful, right? Like,
right.
You don't get a trophy just because you showed up wearing pink. Your attacker is not going to give you that, like, oh, wait, you took Kent's 2-hour private lesson once? Well, you're amazing. I guess I won't fuck with you after all. That's not real. So you're not setting up reality. Unfortunately, the space I find myself operating in a ton, I don't know if this is correlation or causation. So it's either these people are more likely to seek people like us out, or what. But I got a lot of female victims of violence who have decided after violence, fuck that, not again. Right. And I'm sure you've shared in that experience.
Yeah.
Which is there's all those emotions that you have to. I'm gonna call it the white knight gene. Every guy has the white knight gene where he wants to step forth and draw the sword and be there to protect her. Every guy's got some of that in it. You can't fight biology. You can't teach from that place though, because if you do, you're missing things and you're not catching critical components.
Right.
And those folks are. My experience has been when somebody like that comes into the training school, they come in and they think they're alone in it, and they think that like, oh, well, you're not going to believe this, but are you fucking kidding me? I absolutely believe you. It's a real shame, but I 100% believe you. This is an experience I've had enough of times now where this is a thing. So I understand what you're going through. I think that's the most difficult lesson for me to teach emotionally. That's the hardest place for me to come from as a person who's already been victimized. We're working backwards. We're sharing a little bit in that experience. And that individual, through the thought of physical violence, can't help but be visualizing their previous experiences. It is not lost on me that a female presence from an instructor perspective would be very helpful in that place.
Yeah.
Right.
Catherine's been a big help in those classes for sure. But I'm reminded of a comment that a friend of mine, his name is John Ellison. He used to work for Northern Red. And he made a comment one time that resonated with me, and I still use it in classes. Men lie about what they'll do. If somebody looks at my woman, I know what I'll do, and we beat our chests and that kind of stuff. Women lie about what they won't do.
Yep.
I don't know if I could point a gun at somebody until you put up the specter in front of them. But what if they were going to hurt one of your children? And then all of a sudden, it's a whole nother ball game. So,
I think my favorite thought exercise in that realm, when I talk through a female with that, we're often put, and I know you're sharing this too, right? We're often put in this position where the guy is begrudgingly dragging the girl into class or into training or into a private or whatever, and she's not quite into it. And like you said, you bring up, hey, what if you were gonna what if somebody's going to hurt the kids? And they go, oh, well, that might be different. You say, okay, what if somebody's going to hurt you? Well, they start getting a little wishy-washy. And I just do this kind of thing where I kind of take a pause and I'll relax and I'll go, let me ask you a question. Who took the kids to school this morning? And, well, I did. Is that a normal occurrence? Well, yeah. Who made supper? I did. Who read to them tonight? I did. And as they think through it, I just look at them and I'm like, hey, man, I don't know about you, but in my house, mom is the most important human by a long, wide margin.
Mm-hmm.
And my children's lives would be irreparably damaged without their mother. So if not for yourself, ladies, maybe for that reason alone, it might be worth, jumping in. So what about the rest of us? For example, coming up here, not this weekend, not as in tomorrow, but the following weekend, you've got a RDS transition. You've got an 8-hour civilian package going on at West Shore. So you're teaching open enrollment.
Yeah, that's it's funny. I've done that elsewhere. There's a lot of guys out there that are running classes called RDS instructor, and there really isn't. That's not a thing. I mean, you're a firearms instructor. The red dot sight for a pistol is just an accessory. So yes, you can learn some tips and tricks to shortcut the learning curve for people that already shoot pistols and have decided to go to using that accessory for a myriad of reasons. But there is no RDS instructor certification. That's a marketing thing. Okay, cool, whatever. But yeah, I for police, it's a 16-hour minimum. For civilians who don't have that kind of time to dedicate to that, I offer an 8-hour thing. And it's just some ways they can train to get that red dot up in front of their eyes each and every time. Perfect presentations from moving, from standing stationary, understanding the technology and understanding what can go wrong with it and what you do if something goes wrong with it. Some of the better models that are out there. There's like an hour or two maximum of classroom for civilians. The rest of the time is about practicing. And as you probably have heard me say before, practice just long before Scott said it. Practice makes permanent. The goal is to give them the habit of practicing perfectly so that the efficiencies as they begin to manifest themselves in their technique, that reduces their response time by just being efficient. I've said that for years. Perfect practice. It's the neurobiology of learning, which is a whole nother subject if you wanted to get into it, like the books by Daniel Coyle or Anders Ericsson or some of the other people that have written on the neurobiology of learning and myelinization of nerve fibers and all that kind of stuff. There's a science to it, but perfect practice is what I try to get them to do. And I give them little ways to cut corners and avoiding learning the red dot the way I did, which was the hard way. I did everything wrong for a while. And then I finally went to a RDS instructor development school for existing instructors run by INLEFIA. That's how I first got exposed to National Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors Association. And I learned that I could have done it a whole lot easier if I just had some proper instruction. So I do that for civilians in an 8-hour day. I do it for police in a 16-hour day or 16-hour class 2 days. And that's coming up. And then I think we have something shooting while moving at West Shore. And that's again, a civilian thing. It's an 8-hour day. It incorporates not just, we do pivots and turns and moving off the X kind of a thing, but I also get them to start moving their feet. Because I'll be honest with you, when it comes to shooting on the move, just for shooting on the move's sake, it has limited applicability. There, in my limited experience, and ask the infantry guy, but there's usually time to shoot, or there's a time to move really, really fast, and you can't shoot when you're moving really, really fast. So that applicability is limited. However, it does apply if you are the only person in your home and you have to go into a room to rescue your children or move into a space where you happen to be in the vicinity of an active shooter, you have to move into a space and you have to get to your corner, clear your get to your point of domination, clear your sectors of fire, and you might have to shoot on the move as you're moving through what the military calls CQB protocols. And that's very real. And it all begins on the flat range. That's where you begin to pick up that skill set. Time to shoot, it's oftentimes better to plant and shoot accurately, but you can't always do that. So you need that. And it's a confidence builder for civilians as well, to learn that they can shoot while it appears that sight's moving around a whole lot more than it really is. So I offer that as well. I do concealed carry classes for civilians. I do shooting at distance, all that kind of stuff. But they're smaller bites of the apple than I would typically do with law enforcement. And not that law enforcement's better, it's just that they generally have a stronger foundation. If they went to a decent academy, they're supposed to have a stronger foundation that you can build on than most civilians do.
Interesting. So what percentage, like, are you teaching more cops than civs these days, or is it the other way around?
Other way around. Breaking into the police market is tough. One, I'm not going to I did compromise on using the word advanced, but I don't compromise on the integrity of the program. And then the guys that are most popular with them have a resume that I don't have. They've got DevGru on their resume, or they got unit on their resume, or they've got SF or SIF team on their resume. Contractor, but as a contractor. So I charge a little bit less, but the law enforcement market that I do have a toehold in largely comes from word of mouth by people that have been exposed to me as a teacher for the NRA law enforcement division, or in Lefia classes. People who have taken those classes have put the word out that I kind of sort of know what I'm talking about. But again, you might have noticed, but I'm not 35 and I don't depend on this for a living. I'm not trying to make a name for myself. I don't want to be an internet sensation. I'm doing what I want to do. And if
you're on this podcast, it's too late for that. You just got famous. Congratulations.
Well, I'm not out to make a dynasty, none of that stuff. I love Pat Mack. He's a friend of mine, but I don't have that kind of energy that Pat has.
Nobody's got that kind of energy. Jesus.
At this point, he's a character. I could tell you some story, but anyway, I don't have the kind of energy that John McPhee has to build the empire he's building and the things that he does. He's a wicked smart guy, by the way. But I just do my thing. I mean, I'm not going to be famous. I don't care.
I can respect that, man. I really can.
Yeah. If I get a phone call and what I taught them saved their life, I'm happy. That's my reward. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, so real talk. This you and I haven't shared. I started in this business. I think I've said this to you before. I started in this business way too young, looking back on it, right? I didn't hang out a shingle too early, but I was just too immature to be operating a business of the nature of this severity. I've said that 38 times on the show before. That's not some new revelation I just came to. I was not ready for that fucking phone call at all. The first time that happened to me, I was not ready in any way, shape, or form for the gravity of that. And as I look back, I'd like to say, well, of course, dumbass, you should have. That was the point, wasn't it? And I don't think you're ready. I don't think there is such a thing as being ready for that level of consequence until you've experienced it once. Much to serving your point, the duty or the law enforcement person who carries those consequences with them on a daily basis, right? Like that's kind of the point of that service-connected, duty-connected mindset. And I was very shocked to find out about my first one of those. And there have been several since, but that first one really, 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 really rocked me. I was not ready for that in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm man enough to talk to to point out my own flaws or failings or maybe my own miscalculations. But I guess I'll ask you: were you ready to hear that the first time you heard it?
Well, I was grateful to hear it. I don't expect
Sure.
to. In law enforcement career, we didn't get many calls of people that appreciated what we did for them.
Right.
Generally, it was the other way around. But yeah, I wasn't ready for it, but I was grateful to hear it.
Yep.
Because you always wonder if what you're saying is making an impact in people's lives. On the civilian side, you're wondering if what you gave them was of value to them, and if it was of value when it really, really mattered. So when you hear that, it's pretty awesome. I was emotionally ready to handle it. I was mature and all that, but I was grateful to hear it. Grateful and humbled, and I felt blessed. Felt blessed to hear it.
That's the place I'm at with it now. I remember in the moment, I suppose my version of how I thought that would feel versus how it actually felt was very different. And I felt an immediate sense of Jesus Christ, I better brush up on this shit. I better be 10 times better than I thought I needed to be, right? I felt like I was cramming for a test that I didn't realize I was taking. Yeah. And that's probably not a great place to have been in that much. And we're talking 13 and a half years ago at this moment in time, right? But that version of me was like, man, I thought I was just talking about shooting, right? Like there's a big disconnect for me. And let that be a life lesson. So it is rewarding for sure. So now I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions. This is something I'm starting to come around to as I was walking around TACCon and talking to all my friends. I was asking this question, and I was recording their answers. And I'm gonna run this one by you because this is just resulted in some of the best stories, I think. Give me an example of one of the funnier moments you've ever had on a range. You ever had some real? There's got to be some good story.
Well, yeah, there are some, and unfortunately, they're usually associated with teaching and recruit classes. By watching, when we did towards the end of their academy experience, we did things like pepper spray them and then videotape the results, which is awesome. We always show it at graduation. But then when they started bailing out of our training vehicles and then using the cars as cover and stuff, side view mirrors, pow, right through the side view mirror, skipping them off the hood, shooting them into the quarter panel. You'd never put a car out on the range to do anything vehicle related that you're not willing to get shot. It's because it's going to happen. It's going to happen for sure. So those are probably the funniest things. And I can't remember how many they were. It happened over and over again. But yeah, watching the cars get shot or watching rounds go off. Well, this was funny only because nobody got hurt, but watching rounds go off, took the finger on the trigger on the way back to reholster, or they got on the trigger too quick out of the holster. Nobody got hurt, thank God. But in retrospect, we laughed about it privately. We didn't laugh about it in front of the recruits, but we laughed about it as instructors. So those kind of things still bring a smile to my face.
So I heard a lot of similar to that. Those of us who are super primarily civilian sector, one of the things, not that I don't teach cops or soldiers, because I've had the opportunity. A lot of cops and soldiers, like you said, come out and pay for training, and they come and train. But boy, this business brings out some characters, my friend.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, look at. For those of you playing the podcast audio game and didn't get to see Ron's facial reaction to that, I really appreciated his always face palm, like, oh yeah. So one of my favorite.
The lady that.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, the lady that showed up at a class one day, and I tell this story in every class. We make sure that when they bring the weapons in, they don't take the weapons out. We take them out and we make sure they're clear. Well, before we did that, a lady showed up and came in and I told. the table and backed away from it like it was a freaking snake. And she says, my husband unloaded this thing. I said, okay. No magazine in the mag. Well, okay, great. Whoosh, bullet comes flying out. So that changed my protocols, and Kathleen is religious about it. We changed our protocols entirely, but yeah, it's some characters. And then the guys that shoot their target, they're looking at the hole in the paper. It's not quite to their satisfaction. They forget this is in their hand. Can you believe I did that? And they start waving their hands around. That kind of stuff happens.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The people that show up and do that.
So, hold on, because this immediately brought flashbacks from when I worked on the other side of the gun counter. Every time a customer would come in and be shopping around for a firearm, obviously, when you take a weapon out of the case, rack the slide to the rear, lock it to the rear, hand it to the customer in a safe direction, and we gave them very explicit instructions, looking them square in the eye. Sir or ma'am, please keep this weapon pointed in a safe direction at all times. Verify that it's unloaded, etc., etc. Never fails. They immediately, slide, run the slide forward, put it in their hands, and immediately, while they're pointing it right at your chest, wow, this feels great. It's the most comfortable gun I've ever held. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. This is why we check firearms. Never fails. Every time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it in gun stores, even though I didn't work in one. I've seen it when I was, I totally feel your pain. And I don't want to be next to them. When they get a gun in the hand from the clerk who handed it to him properly, and then I'm standing next to him, and now next thing you know, the muzzle's pointed right at me. They just don't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know what they don't know.
All right, so I'll share one. My buddy Tim Kelly and I call this the samurai story. But Tim and I were both students in a Dave Spalding class, and there was a gentleman who was wearing like cut-off shorts and a cut-off tank top shirt. Now, this was in Virginia, hot as all blazes, summertime. I'm out there wearing like a Bass Pro fishing shirt, trying to get all the UV to not ruin my day. And this guy's doing a farmer's tan thing. He don't give a fuck, right? He's a samurai cat. We called him the samurai because he's wearing a red bandana, Tiger Moon style around the top of his head. And Dave is talking. Spalding is standing there being awesome, pontificating awesomeness, whatever he's saying. I couldn't tell you what the hell Dave was saying. But this dude, the entire time Dave would talk, is like miming through like little karate moves. Right? There's no guns in his hands. And this dude is shadow boxing.
I think you told me about this fucking
right
guy.
So it's getting weirder and weirder.
Yeah.
Finally, this dude, while Spalding is talking, we're in the come here semicircle, right? You know the drill. Range clear, headphones up. I'm about to say some brilliant shit. You all come in and listen to my brilliant shit I'm about to say. Come here. Everybody come here. Hustle up. Huddle up. Let's get in here so we can hear. So we're doing in that huddle. Dave is teaching. Now, Dave is holstered, but Dave just shot live rounds, holsters, and is talking. This dude breaks off the semicircle. You figure he's going to go pee or something.
Right.
He then walks downrange, to which Dave's just standing there and does one of these, like, the fuck could this guy possibly be doing? He takes down a target, not his, breaks an upright off of the target stand, lays this target down on the ground, and proceeds to, in our peripheral, start doing fucking samurai sword maneuvers with this target. This is what this individual, who has a loaded Glock 19 on his person, thinks is the most important thing at this moment in time. And Spalding, God bless him, is just holding it the fuck together. Just, like it was 12, now it's 11 or whatever the numbers were, right? And he's just,
right.
He's trying like hell. Tim and I are just like, the grins are creeping up. And we're just, and he's going, he's losing his shit. He turns around and looks at him and goes, "What in the fuck could possibly be the matter with you?" Right? And this dude with a target upright 1x3 in his hand, that he just broke off his line partner's target. Meanwhile, his line partner's sitting there looking at him. What the fuck is the matter with breaking our target? Like, what are you doing? And he goes, "What?" And Dave goes, "Go home. Just go home. Just we're done."
Oh, that's
he goes,
awesome.
"You can take the sword with you, buddy. Just I've never seen anything like it ever since. I've definitely seen some people go into some weird mental
tell me you have ADHD without telling me you have ADHD.
Oh my good God Almighty. It was incredible to watch this dude just dance around like a fool. But I remember thinking, like, God damn, I thought I was weird.
Well, that's a poor soul right there. That's a guy who's totally lost in a fantasy world. And he's probably still there.
Oh, if he's still alive.
So Ron, you'll appreciate this. I do have a side analogy or a side story to go along with this. So, Ron, you have deployed to Afghanistan, yes?
Yes, twice.
Okay, you've been to Kandahar airfield, I'm assuming, yes? Okay, you're familiar with the boardwalk, then, yeah?
Of course, and
okay,
the pond with the brown trout.
Yep. So for those playing the home, Ron is referring to the 40,000 gallons.
I believe the brown trout is probably poo.
Yeah. Ron is referring to the 40,000 gallons of human waste that is kept in an open air sewage treatment facility on Kandahar Airfield. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you look at Kandahar Airfield on Google Earth, you will see a cloverleaf shaped pond. That is exactly what Ron is talking about. However, to paint the picture, the boardwalk was a common communal gathering place on Kandahar Airfield that had a bunch of different stores and shops and restaurants and coffee shops and just all sorts of stuff. Like, it was a watering hole, if you will, for leisurely activities.
But alcohol free.
In the middle of alcohol free, but in the middle of the boardwalk was a soccer field.
Mm-hmm.
Or is a soccer field. It's still there today. Above every U.S. base, or above nearly all bases in Afghanistan, there are what we call aerostats. These are Zeppelins or blimp, helium-filled giant balloons that have multiple camera arrays on them for infrared, EO, electrical, optical, all sorts of different sensors for surveillance of the base and the immediately surrounding area. There is footage of a young private or specialist, either way, junior enlisted individual in the United States Army who is in the middle of Kandahar Airfield's boardwalk soccer field in the middle of the night with a foam sword that I can only say was a LARPing implement, swinging this motherfucker like there was no tomorrow. Whatever dragon existed in his mind on the boardwalk soccer field was vanquished post haste, and it was captured in all infrared white hot glory on the aerostat, and it circulated every major military installation on the planet of this dude just going ape shit in the middle of the night, thinking he was completely by himself at Kandahar Airfield boardwalk. And every time Kent tells that story about the samurai, that image plays through my head. The video of this kid just going nuts goes through my head, and it brings me so much joy. Kent, thank you for telling that story on this episode.
Now, that wasn't the aerostat that tore its moorings and ended up in Pakistan that the Chinese got a hold of, is it?
It very well may have. So I was in the southeast.
One of them did.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It had to be one of those southern or easterly bases that would have where the jet streams would have carried it over to Pakistan.
Yeah.
Anything out west, like Helmand Province and further
Yeah.
west, would have gone into Iran. But dude, that video brought so much joy to so many people in Afghanistan. That dude just going bonkers, swinging a foam sword like a demon in the middle of Kandahar Airfield's boardwalk.
Well, you know,
For the life of me, I've been looking on WikiLeaks and LiveLeak and all these other different websites to try to find that video, and I've yet to find it.
Well, if I find it, I'll get it to you, and vice versa. I'd like to see it because I never saw that one. I've seen video, ISR and Aerostat video, but it was more operationally focused. I never saw that one. Oh man, that sounds pretty good.
It was. I'm almost certain that one ended up in a general's brief. I'm almost certain it did.
Oh, of course.
Man, I don't know how we could possibly top that. I don't think we should try. So here's what we need to do to close out, right? The folks need to get a real good understanding of how to get a hold of you, where to find you. The whole deal with this, right, is when we bring a trainer on, that's us saying go train with this guy, right? So to my alum, to the people that I care so much about, go train with Ron, please. Like, get out there. We always tell people to train with other trainers and other companies, and we vet and we discuss, and we have people on the line, and you know, once we get to a point where we like to cut somebody's jib, this is kind of how we approach it, right? So TJ's scrolling the banner right now, citizensdt.com for the Civ side of the house. Where can they find you on the social medias if they can? Where can they email you? How do you want to be reached out and contacted? Do your plugs, bud.
Well, the other website is Police DFT. That's Police Delta Fox. I can't even talk tonight. PoliceDFT.com. And we're on Facebook as Citizens Defense Training. We're on Facebook as Police Defensive Firearms Training. And I got Instagram pages too. I forget exactly what they're called. I'm not really savvy about Instagram. I play with it a little bit, but I don't know much about it. But best way is through a web contact on either one of those websites, and then the Facebook page. Either one of those are the way to reach me.
Training calendars all listed on the websites. That I was clicking through those links. That's all pretty squared away.
Yep.
So you guys can get a real good understanding of what you can get out of Ron, what you can get from him and from his business. Ron was also nice enough to hook us up at the West Shore Sportsman's with a medical class coming up the end of May the 21st from 5 p.m. to 10. We're doing a free med class. That's been put on by Citizens Defense Training, right? So Ron went out and found us a guy to teach a free med class. So that's pretty neat.
Oh, he's super smart. He's a lieutenant in the police department, a SWAT medic, a paramedic on life flights. He's just really, really good at what he does. He's a 3-gun competitor. He's competed at West Shore, so he knows the area. But he's really sharp, and he's coming out to get people spun up. It's not a full-on TCCC 16-hour class or anything, but it will give people a real good introduction what's out there that they can pursue if they're interested. And I recommend it for anybody that goes to the range to train or even just to have fun. You don't know what can happen. So that's a good option.
Yeah, absolutely. So this podcast is pretty well circulated amongst the training and shooting community at West Shore. So it's also kind of my way of trying to help. Like here he is. Like, here's this dude who's been around for a little bit and stuff, and you guys haven't gotten to know him so well. I mean, been around a little bit around the club. Like, people have asked who you were and what you're about, what your company was and stuff. So this kind of serves as that intro. Put easily, right? Go train with Ron. Get out there. Go. I intend to, absolutely. The minute our schedules coincide. So far, him and I have been line partners. Maybe not actual line. We've shared a line in some capacity.
2 or 3.
At least 3 times.
Yeah.
And he's had.
And then I took your rifle class. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I didn't finish the last hour. I think it was. I had to leave early, but I enjoyed that quite a bit. And, I did my thing, and I picked up some verbiage from you that I stole and I use when I teach people. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
So
100%. Yeah, man. No, you were a great. The best thing you can say about a trainer is he's a good student. So I've got 32 hours of Ron as a student under my belt as a primary, and then an AI, and just here the last 2 days as an AI. Dude's a phenomenal student. So great students make great teachers. That's one of the. If somebody in the training industry kind of gives you that vibe that they're not interested in learning anything from anybody else, or that they're generally not a good student because they can't shut the fuck up and just take curriculum, right? Or can't help but interject. When I was primary in my rifle class and Ron was a student, I was sort of kind of like prodding him I was like trying to get student. No, ask Ron about that. That's like, I was trying to give him a section of an opportunity to have a conversation with a few folks who I want to see train with him genuinely, right? And he came to that with resistance until the point where I was like, no, please tell these folks who the fuck you are. Like, and that's a level of respect that is that's mutually understood in the training business. When I show up on the line somewhere, I'm freaking nobody's nobody. I'm just a guy in the line. And if there's something I could do for you or help you or whatever, I may interject and throw a point here or there to a line partner who I'm helping. But other than that, if for example, this past 2 days, the class we were in, 4 hours of Scott Jedlinski's POI was about students providing coach backs and feedback. So if I'm put in that situation as a line partner, clear I'm going to do what I'm asked. But there's nothing worse than being the guy who's providing unsolicited advice. So
I lost you.
I'm just complimenting you the whole time. That's fine. They'll hear it in podcast. So go train with Ron. And of course, right, like, my God, I want to talk to him about Civil War history. I want to talk to him about more depth and experience in the law enforcement training community. I want to do an episode on how civilians could better teach law enforcement. There's at least another hour and a half of meat that we can get out of him the next time we have him on. And that's your cue. You're invited to come back. Right. So, when and if you feel like it. So as podcast alumni, here's the deal. You as a guest, right? When you've got something you need to promote or you want to talk to or you want to get off your chest, you're not prodding or bothering anybody. You say, hey, I want to come on the show and do a thing on X.
Okay.
And that's what we do. That's how we breed and culture this thing. And if we don't hear from you in a couple months, we're going to be calling you back going, hey, dude, we need to do a part 2. So listeners and fans expect that. And guys, get out there, right? So we're gonna hit our outros, TJ and I, and then we're gonna cut this. It's a nice little meat of a podcast episode for the digital internet on the Apples and all that. You'll have about an hour and a half of solid content from Ron here, and it's pretty cool stuff. TJ, what do you think, man? You got any follow up for him before we let him go? You got anything that?
Nah, man. I mean, Ron, it was an absolute pleasure and a privilege to have you on the show. We appreciate your insight, your intellect, your academic approach. You're certainly a well-read individual, and that certainly comes across and translates very well, or is projected very well by your persona and your personality. And we appreciate having you on here. Certainly beats the knuckle dragging that often takes place when it's just Kent and myself. So yeah, man, to echo Kent's words, looking forward to have you back on the show. And honestly, looking forward to getting to train with you on the range at some point, which actually leads me into an excellent segue of guys, June, what is it? June 10th, Kent?
June 10th and 11th. Yep.
Yep. June 10th and 11th, Kent and I will be running it back. I will be coming up to AI for the defensive pistol metrics class at West Shore Sportsman's with Kent, June 10th and 11th. So looking forward to that opportunity.
Yeah, you guys would say you want to see TJ teaching more. Here's your chance.
I'd like to get some RC East and RC South and RC West stories out of TJ and compare notes on our time. He was there. He left. Your last year there was before I got there. So I'd like. So
my Iraq time, I was in Iraq in 2003 to 2004, again in 2006 to 2007. As a defense contractor, I was in Afghanistan, essentially off and on nonstop from 2009 until 2015.
Oh, okay. All right. So we overlapped. Gardez, Salerno, Campstone out by Herat. Those were in Kop Chergata and Don Patan. You'll know all those places.
Yep. Oh, I know them well. Especially in the latter portion of my career. But yeah, man, been all over. But yeah, man, we'll have to swap notes and stories over a drink one night.
We'll do it. And when you come, if I'm not working, I'll make it to that defensive pistol metrics. I have to check my schedule. 10 and 11 June. I'll check and see if I'm working or not. But if I'm not working, I'll slide over. At the very least, we'll go out for libations. Kent knows a new good place. All right, guys.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, man.
So we're let's see. We got to do the charity thing. Mr. Hayes is still legless. Cam lost his leg almost a year ago. Motorcycle accident. All the T-shirts and all the proceeds from the podcast and all that go to continue to and have gone to our brother there. So if you look at the little logo, that's the Cam's Ass Kicking Contest T-shirt that we're selling on his behalf. And if you look real close, you'll realize he's missing a leg, and that's the pun, right? So he has been killing it. I'm seeing social media of him out on a freaking prosthetic on the gun range. You know, he's out shooting again. He's out doing rifle stuff again. I wouldn't be halfway surprised if you saw him teaching here coming up in the future. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's tough with him now. I'm trying to get him to put his best foot forward, and for some reason, he just won't do it. He's I don't know.
There it is. The show wouldn't be complete without a dad joke.
He won't toe the line with me. I don't know what's happening. No, but we love you, dude, and Miss Kelsey, we love you too, and we're sorry about what had happened to you. So if you guys want a silly little T-shirt that my wife looks real good in, buy the Cam's Ass Kicking Contest T-shirt off the website, and that money, we're pretty happy to be able to send a couple sizable checks to our boy. Right, it actually means something. So thankfully TJ and I are in a spot money wise where the podcast can just be its thing, and when there's a way to make some bread, we can send it around and help folks. So his turn has been at the wheel hard, so that's where that's going. As far as anything else, man, Sling'N Lead podcast can be found on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Apple, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes. We're like all the places Joe Rogan is. We're just not on the same page, right? So like he's in the first results and we're in like the 500th results. So look us up, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a review. If you enjoyed this episode, if you want to hear more from Ron, all his particulars and links and all that stuff will be in the show notes. So wherever you find this, you will be able to find Mr. Flowers. TJ, what else you got, man? Send them out.
All right, folks. So, of course, if you're going to carry a gun, you should carry medical. And even if you choose not to carry a gun, damn it, you should still carry medical. Head on over to darkangelmedical.com to pick up your med kit, vehicle mounted, something you can carry on your person, throw in your back pocket, or something you can strap to your ankle. Kerry Davis over there at darkangelmedical.com has it all. I do have a brief update. I just recently was on his website, and it looks like that the discount code that we've previously been broadcasting no longer is effective. However, medical is still important, ladies and gentlemen. While you can often save some money where it counts, at the same time, medical is one of those areas where I don't care what it costs. You have to ultimately ask yourself, what is your life or the life of your loved ones worth? After all, you are far more likely to require medical attention than you are to need the use of a firearm in various situations throughout your daily life. So please consider patronizing darkangelmedical.com. Of course, we do want to show Kerry some love. So if you can let him know that the Sling'N Lead podcast sent you in your order notes, we and Kerry would greatly appreciate it. Of course, anything that you want to find out about Green Mountain Defense Training can be found at greenmountaindefense.com/training. And if you want to support the podcast, you're going to buy gun stuff anyway, so you might as well buy it from our approved affiliate links, greenmountaindefense.com/affiliate links, link down in the video below, as well as down in the comment section. So if you are so inclined and you have any questions, you can reach out to us on the various social media platforms, or if you're feeling froggy, you can reach out to us via email at slingandleadpodcast@gmail.com. Until we see each other next time, that's all the time we have for this week. Take care of each other. God bless you all. Get out and shoot.
Thanks,
Bye,
guys.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Yes.